Hello and welcome back to 7 Skills for the Future podcast. My name is Emma Sue Prince and I'm author of 7 Skills for the Future. This podcast is all about bringing those skills into your everyday on a Monday morning. So bringing skills like adaptability, thinking critically, having empathy in every conversation that you have, living with integrity, being proactive, being optimistic and being resilient. And I really do believe that it is in small ways that we bring these skills into our everyday and they make a really big impact. And today I'm talking to Rachel Paling, who is a specialist in neuroscience and a neuro-language coach. Rachel is director of an organization called Efficient Language Coaching. She works with companies worldwide to enhance communication and cross-cultural performance. And I'm really interested today to talk to Rachel about what truly makes up great communication skills and how do we actually bring that skill of empathy into our conversations and into the encounters that we have. We love to hear from you, our listeners, and you'll find out more about how to get in touch with us at the end of the show. So welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thank you, Emma Sue. Great to be here.
Lovely to have you. And I have to say that last time I spoke to Rachel, I was actually recording an interview for her podcast and the sun was shining brightly. And after days of rain, the sun is shining brightly again today. So I don't know what it is about you, Rachel, but you seem to bring the sunshine.
Oh, fantastic. And I have to say this morning it was raining here as well. I'm in France at the moment and now it's brilliant sunshine. So yes, must be when we come together.
Yeah. Yeah, must be. So I know you've just come back from traveling in Peru.
Yes.
What were you doing there?
Actually, I was working. I was delivering my course, training a wonderful group of language teachers and transforming them into neurolanguage coaches. And just phenomenal. We had 3 days together, very intense days. I also delivered a taster for language teachers to try to understand what it is that I'm doing, and I had the honour of delivering some free talks to 4 universities. And for me, it's the great message of bringing neuroscience and the brain to teachers and really getting them to reflect.
Sounds great. I mean, I'm really curious about this term neurolanguage. Can you explain a bit more about that?
With pleasure. And, you know, neurolanguage coaching is really the combination of coaching plus neuroscience in the language learning process. And, you know, a lot of people think, okay, well, how do we do that? And I think this is one of the key issues that we have nowadays. We have so much from the neuroscience, we have so much from this term neuroeducation, that actually doing it in practice is the part that a lot of teachers are missing. And neurolanguage coaching is about bringing into practice what the neuroscience is telling us about how potentially learning can be more effective, more efficient, and maybe even faster. And it's about connecting in to understand how the brain functions, how the brain learns, how the brain reacts, and using coaching as a vehicle of delivery, style, also structure, but also the ability to coach people around emotional triggers and to coach people into a learning process that's going to work for them.
That sounds incredible. It sounds as if through using this methodology that people can actually learn languages faster. Is that right?
We've got a lot of clients who are actually doing that. Yes, really. It's all about the combination. You know, when we learn something, it really is that chemical, emotional combination that really imprints the learning into the brain, and how do we as educators achieve that? How do we help learners get into what I call a perfect learning state, and a state where we're helping them to remember and use it? And I think the interplay of conscious and subconscious brain is fascinating, and something that obviously we're still learning about as scientists and neuroscientists, and as human beings. We're still delving into the mysteries of our brain.
Yes, I mean, it just reminds me of a time when I was trying to learn Mandarin for a trip to China. And I found it very, very challenging. If I had this coaching, what would I have experienced? What would I have expected to experience in terms of learning Mandarin?
Definitely, firstly, the question would be, what is the focus of the learning? What is it that you need? And getting into that focused state, we're then going to really find out the key building blocks that we need to start you off with. Now, and one thing that really fascinates me as well, I have learned all of my language through connections, through brain connections. So I did French, Greek, and Latin at school. And from there, that catapulted me into Spanish, and I'm autodidactic with Spanish. I've taught myself. When I was 15, I taught myself. That then catapulted me into Italian and Catalan. And then from the Germanic side of English, I went into German. And from 2016, we now have the research from the neuroscience saying that when we learn a new language, the brain goes to the native structures first. So for me, the fascinating thing would be, what can we try to understand is similar with Mandarin and English? And in fact, there is quite a lot of the grammar is actually quite simple in Mandarin, from what I understand. So I think as well the structure is similar. It's subject, verb, object. And the verb changes are similar. I am, you are, he is, they change. Now, what is the really, really maybe difficult part for us as English speakers is the sounds. The sounds in Mandarin makes such a difference. So helping you as a learner to really understand, okay, there are going to be sort of easy parts that we can relate to, but there's going to be harder parts that we're going to have to really work at. It's going to be mentally preparing you into that language first. I see. I particularly loved the alphabet and the signs and all of that. Yes.
Although, of course, I didn't actually need to learn that. I needed to learn to speak a little bit of Mandarin, but I did get sidetracked a lot by that because I just loved it so much.
And I would be fascinated, as your coach, I would be fascinated to see how we could really play on that visual written side, connecting it with that spoken side, so you get excited with both.
Yes. And
stimulating, because obviously you found a stimulator, you're sidetracked with it, you're distracted pleasantly, you're curious with that side, so how could we then bring in the spoken to that curiosity? That would be fascinating.
Fantastic. And I mean, I'm in awe that you speak so many languages.
I don't speak Mandarin.
But I guess it's. I guess if the more languages you learn, the more you can learn, right?
Absolutely. And for me, I've worked with language teachers from all over the world. And at one point on my course, we go into this curiosity about language. So I love asking about other languages. So I know a lot about the grammar from Polish, Hungarian, Czech, Russian, Ukrainian, Chinese, Japanese. And I love to ask those questions of, okay, how is that in your language? How is it in mine? How does it fit? How does it different? And it's, for me, it's just, when we get the brain into curiosity, we get the right brain state.
Really interesting. Really interesting. Now, I want to ask you about one of the skills that I write about and teach about, which is empathy. And I'd love to hear your take on empathy and how you use empathy in your coaching.
Well, firstly, I want to say, Emma Sue, you do some fantastic work. You do some great work with communication and really highlighting also this question of empathy is great, because I do think there's a lot of misunderstanding of what is empathy, what is sympathy as well. And for me, I'm fascinated with the neuroscience, how the brain reacts. And in fact, there is a fantastic neuroscientist in Germany called Tanja Singer, and she studies exactly the neuroscience of empathy and the neuroscience of compassion. And she really highlights that there is a difference in the brain. When we are empathetic, we are lighting up the reward and pain circuits of the brain. And I feel what you feel. If you feel good, I feel good. If you feel bad, I feel bad. And we're really getting that correspondence. And even the mirror neurons are strengthening that feeling. Now, with the neuroscience of compassion, we actually light up the love areas of the brain. We have a very old part of the brain, which is part of the reptilian, which is the periaqueductal grey. And this connects us in with the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is really that nerve running all the way through, connecting all the major organs, heart, up to the throat, and then coming into connecting the brain. And when we go into compassion, there are two steps. The first step is I feel what you feel. But the second step is, what can we do to help you here? And it's that action step that for me is the important thing. And I do think as a coach, and I train all of my neurolanguage coaches to come into this aspect of going beyond empathy.
Yeah. It's really interesting what you're saying, because I actually had on the podcast a few weeks ago the CEO of Mindfulness at Work, Louise Chester, and she actually said the same thing as you. She was talking about empathy, and she was talking about how we need to go beyond empathy and tap into that compassion, because compassion is where we take action. Yeah. So it's really interesting to hear you say the same thing.
Absolutely. And I think, another mistake, we live in a world where everybody is interested to demonstrate empathy by saying, oh, I've been through that too. Now, as a coach, I often think that my coachee doesn't want to hear whether I've been through that experience. Sometimes my coachee just needs me to focus on them and what they are experiencing. And for example, I had a personal example of this. Last November, I lost my purse. And I spoke to 3 people. Now, 2 out of 3 said to me, oh my God, that happened to me. And they then launched into their experience. And I was actually left quite bemused, because I was feeling my reaction, which was, I don't care what happened to you. I've lost my purse and I've got this problem now, and that was my immediate gut reaction. And the third person hit it on the nail. They said, Rachel, I'm so sorry to hear that. What do you need? Do you need any help? And that for me was like, oh, thank God.
But I think the first 2 examples for me are more like sympathy,
right?
Absolutely. And sympathy as an identifying with what you're experiencing, because I've experienced it too. Whereas with the empathy, it's about, I've been there, and I want to be there with you in your experience.
Yes.
So that. But then I guess then you have that added bit, which is, okay, what are we going to do about this, or how can I help?
Sometimes we may share that experience with the other person, and actually it may really affect us. I remember doing a life coaching session with a lady whose neighbour was blocking her in. And she really was frustrated and angry because this neighbour was blocking her in. She couldn't get out of her garage, and it was happening more and more. And ironically, at that point in my life, I had exactly the same problem. So as she was talking, my stomach was burning with my own problem. But, as a coach, we cannot come into that. And for me, it was about calming myself down to focus on my coachee. And to focus on, what can you do in this situation? And that person never knew that I had the same problem as she did.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think are some of the ways that we can bring empathy and bring some of this into not necessarily coaching conversations, but just to our general interactions with other people?
It's interesting.
I don't think we do it enough.
No, we don't. We don't. And you know, I often say that we live in a world where everybody is telling everybody what to do. You should do this, you should do that. I think this, I think that. This has been my experience.
We're very egotistical, though, aren't we?
We are.
We do have these egos.
We are. And, you know, in some ways, our brains, we interpret the world according to our own brain. So obviously, you know, I always think, well, whatever I've experienced is something that I've experienced, not something that somebody else has experienced. So my interpretation is totally different to anybody else. And I always think, you know, whenever I'm speaking to somebody, I always try to take a step back and think, well, who am I to tell this person what to do? Who am I to know what this person is experiencing? I need to find out from them. And for me, it's about really coming into that person saying, share with me if you want to. Just tell me how you feel, what's happened, how can I help? And I try to remove me and whatever is happening with me from that process.
It's hard, though, sometimes, isn't it? I think.
It is. I mean, it really depends on, obviously it depends on whom we're speaking to. It depends on that degree of relationship. And I always think it's really that question of how helpful is it what I want to input here? How helpful is it in the dynamic between us, in the relationship between us, in my need to communicate? And I wonder sometimes, you know, I guess because of my coaching background, I guess that now, even in my personal relationships, I sort of come into asking people if I can share. You know, asking that permission. May I share with you what I've experienced, and this is what's happened to me. If you're interested, fine. And if not, then let's move on.
That's interesting.
Right. Yes.
I think that it can be, as you said, you know, it can be hard for us to actually express real empathy because we just have so much of our own perspective there, kind of clouding our vision, if you like, you know, and we also have this ego. So I think empathy does require effort, and but has huge rewards if we actually apply it, if we consciously apply it, like you say in your, you know, everyday conversations. Like what value am I going to add here with what I'm going to be saying? Because I think quite often we just want to make a point for some reason.
and Emma Sue, may I say that we live in a noisy world. We're used to noise. We're used to chatter. You know, when I was flying back from Peru, I had a 5-hour stop in Madrid. And it was 5 o'clock in the morning, very early in the morning. And honestly, people were on the telephone having the most, may I say, futile conversations. And I was thinking, goodness, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. And they're talking, this lady next to me was talking about cutting spaghetti and giving instructions on how to cut spaghetti. And it was like, goodness. And I really was thinking at that point, you know, how can we regain depth in our communication? And how can we move away from the non-necessary chatter that we seem to be persistently in?
I think some of that is around being able to set boundaries, both in terms of how we interact with our, you know, with our technology, but also how we're interacting with other people. And you know, that situation where, you know, we're so often exposed to other people's noise, other people's conversations, and choosing to set boundaries, whether that's by, you know, popping in your headphones to listen to a great podcast, or, you know, practicing mindfulness perhaps, or just finding a way to kind of not let that noise come in. Because I want to ask you this, from your experience, what impact do you think all that noise has on our brains and our ability to interact well.
Definitely, we have noisy brains, and it's about us trying to understand how to take back the control and how to be in control of when to have that, let's say, active, hyperactive, intelligent, analytical, rational, talking brain, and when to then say, no, now I'm disconnecting, I'm going to go and be quiet, and being able to do that. And that, nowadays, is an art. And it takes and requires discipline. Definitely. And here we're talking about maybe mindfulness, maybe just sitting quietly, maybe going for a walk, maybe doing meditation, whatever it is. Each one, I do think that everybody's different. Everybody has to find their way of being able to calm the brain.
Yes.
And control it.
Otherwise, there's never any space for anything else, is there?
Well, I do think that, we go into this incessant chatter or busyness in our brain that just at some point we just can't handle it anymore.
And that surely has an impact on our ability to have empathy
Absolutely.
and to listen and communicate
Absolutely.
well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, I do want to ask you a question, which is potentially slightly controversial, but I think because we were talking about this before we started the recording of this interview, I think it would be interesting for some of our listeners. And I know that I'm aware that neuro-language coaching is something that's relatively new, and I'm aware that you are a pioneer in this field. And, when we're pioneering something, we often come across people who don't like what we're doing or find fault with what we're doing. And so I wanted to ask you if you're happy to share why you've experienced some of this in your work, and where is that coming from, and why do people feel so strongly about this?
Honestly, Emma, so I think you're also in that position of pioneering and doing something different. So I think, we probably share maybe a lot of this experience. And I think you're right. I think, firstly, people are puzzled by what we're doing. And then secondly, I think people then say, oh, I'm doing that too. But in fact, they say that without actually understanding what it is that we're doing. And that for me is quite interesting, when people don't even go into the depth and detail of what we're doing to find out, is it the same or is it different? And I think, there is that sort of general disbelief of something new. Until it kind of is there and people are saying, oh gosh, what is this? And then it kind of, there is resistance, there is rejection, there is that whatever there is, I don't know to the extent of what's happening in people's brains. I can only imagine. And, I'm trying to sort of, I'm grateful for these people who are actually bringing to the public neuro-language coaching, because as they raise their voices and say, hey, what is this, and this isn't different and everything else, they're actually helping to raise the profile, and that's great. So I'm grateful to them, because people are turning heads and saying, oh, what is this? And, for me, the passion in everything that I'm doing, it really is about, as I said before, that bridge between the science and the practice. And it's that question of, we have technology that is going in leaps and bounds. And in 5-10 years, technology is leaping into, artificial intelligence. We're just on a route which is a highway to very extreme intelligence. Now, on the other side, we can see an educational sort of history that over the last 200 years is going at snail pace, changing. There are some amazing people out there at the moment bringing changes into education. And I want to recognise each and every one of them. because what we're trying to do, and I include myself, I include you in this as well, because it's about communication. What we're trying to do is say, come on, we need to bring in some other changes. We need to bring in fundamental changes. How teachers teach, how teachers speak to learners. Our learners have changed. They are different.
Yes.
We live in, I was speaking to somebody the other day, children are much more sensitive. They're much more caring about plants, animals, world, the ecology. They're much more, we need to understand them more, and the way that we communicate with each other has to adapt to now. And the way that we bring in learning has to adapt. The way we bring in, anything. We have to change the patterns of communication. We have to change the structure of learning. And I do think above all, we have to change this idea that everybody should fit into one box. Educational systems are very much focused on a system where everybody has to be squeezed and pushed in. And more and more people nowadays do not fit in this system, and more children are being marginalized, labeled, and those children are then scarred for life. And I think you and I have sat together with mature learners who bring back those memories from school. I can't learn.
Yes, they do.
I'm never going to learn English. I'm never going to learn French because my teacher said, and they're 50 years old.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to really understand, how we can break and move education and how we deliver education. And for me, how we bring language and communication in a totally different way.
Well, it sounds like you're disrupting the language training industry, and I'm disrupting the personal development, soft skills industry. So, which is a great thing. It's a great thing. So, Rachel, if our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, can you give us some pointers as to where they can find you?
So, the website, the mother website of them all is www.neurolanguagecoaching.com. And also my book is on Amazon, Neurolanguage Coaching. And if I just have a few seconds, I have another book coming out this summer. And it's going to be a very, very different book. It's actually about brain-friendly grammar and how to deliver brain-friendly grammar for language teachers. As I say, it's going to be a very different grammar book. So we'll see how people like it or don't. We will see.
Fantastic. And of course, we will have all of those in our show notes for you to find. So, Rachel, what's next? What have you got in the pipeline coming up?
Well, I have to say London is next, and hopefully I'll be having a meeting with you. That will be great to meet in person, definitely. Athens, going to meet my publisher for the first time, Express Publishing. Very grateful to them. They are absolutely wonderful. They support this concept so much. And great to meet them. And in August, I will be traveling again to the Americas, and for the first time visiting Chile.
Wow, fantastic.
Excited.
Conquering the world.
Little by little.
Well, thank you, Rachel, so much for being on the show today. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much as well. I'm always grateful. And honestly, as I said, it's phenomenal the way that you are bringing in a different aspect to soft skills and communication. Well done.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the 7 Skills for the Future podcast. You can find all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere where podcasts can be found. If you want to make sure that every new episode ends up on your phone, all you need to do is hit the subscribe button. And while you're there, why not give us a 5-star review so more people can find out about the show? If you'd like to stay in touch or send in one of your questions for Emma Sue, then go to Unimenta on Twitter, 7 Skills for the Future on Instagram, or at unimenta.com. We'd love to hear from you. And of course, there's the book, 7 Skills for the Future, available at booksellers everywhere. Season 4 is just around the corner, so keep subscribed and we'll see you soon.